So this is a webinar about how to plan your projects better. So it is about planning. That is project planning, scheduling, making a list of things to do, saying what sequence they're going to be in, and executing that. And I'm doing this from the perspective of presenting a software product called Power Project, which I want to explain very briefly. My name is Richard Ormerod. I've got a background in the construction industry in the UK, and this is mainly aimed at our UK audience, but this is being broadcast, I know, to several people overseas. And I work for a company called Alicosoft, previously Asta, and we are the software developer behind this piece of software and family of associated products. So it's in the general category of project management software. We've been doing it for a long time. We feel we've got a good handle on it, what it is that people want. We improve the product by feedback from people using it. So it's been developed along the way for many years and is a very honed product. And our whole strategy is to provide you with something that's easy to use, but has also got a lot of capability when you need it. So it's easier to use than Microsoft Project, which is the sort of entry point in the marketplace, and it's at least as powerful, if not more powerful, than some of the more expensive systems like Primavera P6 from Oracle. So quite a bold claim, but easily backed up. So I'm presenting this to you in the UK, but we sell this all over the world, so you can have this in many languages and in a lot more countries. And whilst we are talking about a piece of software today and how to use that effectively, what we offer as a company is often a key point of a decision for an organization, because we can give advice before anything happens or at any point through the life cycle of your usage or interest. We can offer training, general public training, specific training, and we run a well-staffed, knowledgeable help desk, so you can reach out, speak to a human being who knows all about it very quickly, and you're not charged for that. So we have well over 100,000 users worldwide, and the reason you're sitting in front of your screens today, I would wager, because Power Project is one of the standards, is the main standard in the wider construction industry, both in the UK and throughout the European community. So, and that's focused on all the names that you see before you is about all the contracting fraternity. So these are large companies whose names are easily recognized, and they've got hundreds of licenses of our software because they've got hundreds of projects. And so they go through a selection procedure on a regular basis. They test everything in the market and they keep coming back to Power Project. So, but it isn't just the contracting fraternity. They've got large numbers of users, but they're not the largest user, but they are the biggest sector. But it's throughout the food chain of the industry that Power Project is popular. So client organizations doing early feasibilities, high quality outputs, cash flows, but also a particular interest is those people who sit between clients and contractors before projects happen, and sadly sometimes when they've gone wrong, and these people are also a very important market and users of project planning software and Power Project in particular. But probably the single largest number of people, although there are many smaller companies, are the trade contractors, the supply chain, who actually do the work for the main contractors. So they've got to fit in with both the work of the main contractor, but they've also got a different problem where they've got many smaller projects all going on at the same time, and it's about spinning plates and keeping everybody happy. And they use Power Project in a slightly different way, where you've got many projects from different people rather than one big project with many people contributing. So so that's our construction industry. Apart from we have a particular specialism in house builders. So people estimate that the use of Power Project in the general construction industry in the UK is about 75%. So 75% of all construction projects of a not a trivial size, but small to very large, use Power Project in their planning. But with house builders, it's even larger. So an even greater number of house projects of a medium to large size use Power Project in their planning. So that is just trying to give you some background. So I'm getting a comment from Paul Ross, where has the audio gone? So I think I'm still broadcasting. Has anybody else got a problem before I continue? I'm not muted. So Oscar's saying, hi, I've become muted. Maybe I have. No, Andrew's saying okay. So a couple of people seem to be having sound problems, but other people can hear me perfectly. So I think if you hear I've got a sound problem, it's going to be something at your end, guys. So I'm sorry about that. I shall continue. Okay, so that's the end of our sort of presentation about the background to our company, etc. And I want to talk now about the product itself. So I'm going to continue the webinar at this point. And so what I want to point out really is at this point, Power Project is a well-behaved Windows application with a very familiar sort of control ribbon, all the same shortcuts that you get in Word and Excel. The fact you can customize the whole interface with all the menus and everything is as you would probably expect, but it is very, very good. And because it's based on sort of Word, Excel, you're already halfway up the learning curve. And so when we want to make a project plan, we want to start from a point where somebody's done quite a lot of work for us. And so rather than starting from completely from scratch, we're going to start with a template file that somebody's made that's got a lot of information that is going to be very useful to us, and we don't have to re-enter it, like when are all the holidays in our particular country. And so we supply a number of standard templates, and this is one of them, but people often also customize that and make that a specific template for their own organization. It just means that it saves you a lot of effort and work, and I'd strongly recommend that you do this. Any Power Project plan can be saved as a template for future use. So we select a template file, and it's exactly the same in Word and Excel. You can start a template, a Word document from a template, and people have set up logos, title boxes, that sort of thing. So I'm going to make a data file. So this is a single file name. This is the standalone product. So this is not the multi-user version of Power Project, which we do have. This is the desktop solution. So I can save a file to any location I can get to. This is in fact a SQLite database behind the scenes. This is the important bit. This is the name of your project. What am I going to be calling the project that we're working on? So this is going to be New Street WC2. And when we're going to start that is the start date of the project, when you first are going to do some work, and that could be design work, it could be construction work, but no task can exist before this date. And we can also change that date very, very easily without any problem. So I'm setting that in the past so we can talk a little bit about progress later on at the very end of the webinar, and then we get this presentation on screen. So I want to take a moment just to discuss what you're seeing in front of you. So if I can remember where the drawing tools are, so if I say there are these three main areas of the screen, there's this area on the left hand side which we call the project view, and that holds all of the information that we've generated in our library. So we can create a library with another toolbar button up here, or we can edit directly on here, but we can establish all of the calendars in the project we want to use, or all the resources, all the color coding, reporting libraries, etc. So all of these can be set up in advance and edited in this interface or in another more extensive area. And then there's a spreadsheet. after the project view, which we'll talk about briefly, but as you would expect. And the main area of the screen, we're trying to maximize this and make this as big as possible, is the bar chart area. So anything we change on the bar chart is changed in the spreadsheet and vice versa. And anything we edit in either of those is also shown on this status line at the foot of the screen, and you can move that around, of course, and that's also a powerful editing environment. So that's hopefully a bit of a heads up of what we're looking at. So in the project view, I say we've already got loads of calendars. Somebody's shown us when Christmas and Easter is for the next 20 years. And all the resources that we might have, which are organized in a hierarchical fashion if we want them to be. So you've got a lot of things that are set up in advance. And I'm saying on the spreadsheet side, this is very important because obviously this is a way of entering data and showing it. We can insert a column at any point, and we can reference any information in the project, which we collect in these sort of main headings, all the things about dates, all the things about progress. You can see there's a vast amount of information. So we can put any of that information in any column, and we can format that information as well. So we can say how dates should be displayed or durations, and we can give it any color and font. So the arrangement of columns is something that you can also save, and that is in this view tab. This whole window is called a view, and this table of columns, you can save it and give it a name, and then you can recover it at the future. So if you've got some standard ones, so later on we're going to be talking about progress, I can just bring forward one that I've used before, and I can very easily complete that. I don't have to know how to set it up. I can go back to the one that I had previously, and we can see the information there. So that's all I'm going to say about spreadsheets. You can print them, you can export them, you can import into them, those sorts of things. So so the spreadsheets are important, but that's all we're going to talk about those right now, because the bar chart area, when I take the mouse across that boundary, this is why people buy Power Project. So it becomes a crosshair at the top of the screen up here, and at the bottom of the screen down here is the date of where that cursor is located, and we can scroll that plan, and we're trying to make this the very best Gantt bar chart system in the world. A brave claim, but one we are trying to live up to, and it's been a very important area. It's the main working area. It's very intuitive. This area at the top of the screen is called the date zone. It's also very important. It's got 4 rows at the moment, but it can have up to 10 rows. If I put the mouse on any tick mark, I can reduce the scale just by dragging. I can pick up the whole thing without a tick mark and scroll sort of left and right. So you've got a lot of ability to move around. We could also say, well, when we get to the end of June 19, that's so far in the future, I want that to have a different scale. So after that point there, we can scrunch all that up, and we've still got all this displayed at a much higher scale later on. So it's full of presentational and useful aspects like that, just to make your experience of use as smooth as possible. But now we're getting down to the brass tacks of project planning. We've got to make a list of things to do. We've got to make these not too general and not too detailed. So at this level, I'm thinking, well, what's the first thing I'm going to do, assuming we're starting on site? So I'm going to put up a hoarding, a fence around the site to keep it safe. And then I'm going to go to the duration cell, and I'm going to type a letter and number combination. So I'm going to say 11D, and that means 11 days. So, but I've got my duration cell formatted to show me weeks and days. So with the calendar that I particularly got now, and I can edit that on screen, I can drag it around, I can stretch and shrink it, I can move it, and then when I move it, it's not putting an imposed date on it in the way that Microsoft Project would do, that's hidden and you don't see it and has got some dramatic effects later on. So anything I can do in here, I can do on screen, etc. So you've got all of those abilities, and there's the August bank holiday coming into view, and that's had the effect of making this task 1 day longer, because the duration I've got is the working duration, not the elapsed duration. So if I move that task by 1 day, you'll see that get longer by an extra day because the holiday's making it all a bit later. So that's the sort of situation that you have that Power Project deals with elegantly. I'm just going to reformat my date column so that I can see it in a more easier way for me. So the task before is to break down the plan into steps that are manageable and predictable. We've got a better chance of getting their duration correct. So we've got a hoarding to do, and then we've got a bit of demolition, and then we've got some excavation, then we've got some drains and a manholes, and then foundations and a ground floor slab, and that's the end of this phase. So we were aiming for, depending on the size of your project, the length of your project, tasks that are not too long, so nothing more than 3 or 4 weeks. So demolition's going to be 16 days, they tell us, and so I'm getting different coloured symbols on screen because that's designating the criticality of these activities. But at the moment, I haven't put any logic links in, so I'm going to just turn off the appearance of criticality. We'll come back to that in a second. So, but the excavation, we've got to wait till the demolition's finished. That is going to take us 4 weeks, so that's quite a big thing. And part way through that, we're going to do some drains and manholes, and then we can do some work on a foundation, some foundations, and so I misspelt that, so I meant to go down a row. So I can insert a row here now, so I can insert a bar and say that's where we've got our ground floor slab, which is also going to take us 20 days, and the end of the phase is just an event in time. It's a milestone, a point in time, and a milestone is only a task which has got no duration at all. So that just marks an event that we can say we have. So making a project plan, I can move these around very easily, and I like to put them roughly where I want them to go. But many people often start with a list that's or everything is at the left-hand side. So you can, it's now about linking it, thinking how these things fit together. I'm just going to undo those 2 steps. And so you have unlimited undo. Everything I've done, I can redo, undo without limit. Even if I save, I can still do that. But the main point, now the second main point, is you've got your list of things to do. Their durations are sensible. You've had a sensible way of estimating their duration. You tested that by asking a couple of people who might be doing it, or you've got some knowledge of that as well. And then we're going to say, well, when we finish the hoarding, we do have to do that before we can start the demolition. So in Power Project, you can create logic links, as they're called, in columns, on dialogues, but mainly directly on screen. So when you put the mouse around the edge of an activity, you get a different cursor shape. When you pull away, you get a line connected to the origin. And when I let go, on the destination, it moves that activity because I've got the auto scheduling turned on. So every time I make a change, it does a full, what's called a critical path analysis. So I do have to finish the demolition before I can do the excavation. And I don't have to finish the excavation before I start the drains. I can start the drains after we've done the first 8 days of the excavation. So you can see there that I can pull a link out of the middle of an activity or part way through an activity, and if I double click on that link, you can get to the link's properties, which you can see in other places. And when you draw a link, we're interpreting it into one of these standard, what are called link types, and they can get a bit confusing for people, but really they're just saying that this link starts, the next task can start 8 days after the what's called the predecessor, the first task. But by drawing it, where you draw it from, where you draw it to, in Power Project, we interpret that, and it makes the whole thing a lot easier, both for non-technical and technical planners. But we do have to finish the manholes before we can finish the last 10 days of the foundations, and we can't start the foundations until we've done at least 15 days of the excavation, okay? And we can start the ground floor slab when we've done the first 10 days of the foundations. When we've done the foundation ground floor slab, it's the end of that phase. So we can put all our scheme together, and this is where we can now reveal which items are critical. So those are the red ones. If you delay any of those or make them longer or shorter, it will extend the end of the project. So if I say it's going to take us 2 weeks and 2 days to do the hoarding, every activity on the critical path that is red is going to be impacted by that and move forward by that extra 2 days. So the if you want to make the project shorter, then the only way is through reducing the duration of critical activities. And there are 2 activities here that are not critical. So can we ignore them? But they've got something called float. So I can move the manholes activity because that has got what's called free float. So I can move that activity to there before it in turn will become critical. And that's all that it's saying. It's got to be a time in hand. You can start it later, you could extend its duration, and you wouldn't have an impact on the end of the project. But there is another sort of float as well, which is called free float. So free float, the drains has no free float, but it's got total float, which is a thin line. So I can move the drains and consume its total float, but that in turn would mean that we had to move the manholes to accommodate that as well. So the manhole guys better be able to move, otherwise it's all a bit theoretical. So you do have to check some sort of real world issues when you're thinking about float. But float is good because it lets you focus on those things that have got the least amount of float, but don't forget about those tasks that have got float. Now, you don't have to show that. You can hide it or show it as you will, including the critical path. So it depends who you're giving these plans to, whether you want them to be, how much information they're showing. To your team, you could show the critical items, but unless you declare it, you can't later rely on it. And if something happens that is outside your control, you can't demonstrate the knock-on impact. And that is what all this is about, because in a construction project in particular, the schedule is a contractual document. And so you're saying we're going to do this in this time frame, and if anything's outside our scope, if we found some asbestos in the demolition and that delayed the whole thing and made it 4 weeks long, that's not going to be our problem, and we're not going to be fined for being late. So there is a bit of a sort of cat and mouse game about cause and effect, and you've got to be able to demonstrate it effectively. And that's why Power Project is so popular, because Microsoft Project is hold below the waterline in that particular regard. And so let's take an example here and show you why. So I've got these 2 activities, and they've just got one logic link between them, and that's all Microsoft Project will allow you to do. And if you said, well, if the foundations were to take 6 weeks, would that have an impact on the end date of the project? And it won't, not in this scenario. If I reschedule, I force a calculation, it has no impact on that. But if I undo that, what I just did, and say, well, actually, and only Power Project can do this, when we do have to finish the ground floor slab before we can finish the last 5 days of we have to finish the foundation before we can do the last 5 days of the ground floor slab. So you can have multiple links between 2 activities, and you often get this overlapping sense of processes in construction. In particular, you could break everything down to very, very small steps, but it gets too complicated. And then if I said, well, will the foundations being changed in the design to make it take 6 weeks, will that have an effect on the plan? Yes, it will. And only Power Project can show you that, because only Power Project can put that additional link into the system. And if you've been tripped up by that, in a sense, it can be very expensive. But now I want to just turn a little bit away from the scheduling, because that is a basic thing, and there are 2 two or three basic things there that we've also demonstrated about how to plan projects better. But one of them is also communicating, and Power Project has always been very, very focused on the quality of presentation. So we can also have as a graphical layer on top of the Gantt chart, and we can put free-form text boxes anywhere, so we can leave notes. So we have mixed fonts in those notes, and they sit where you put them, and they're very well behaved on the printing. But you can also pick them up, and as you go near an activity, you get a different cursor shape. And if I let go, that activity, that piece of text is connected to that activity. So if that activity moves, it takes that piece of text with it. And if it is connected to a task, it also means that if I right mouse click here, I can also insert any of the information we can put in a column. So it picks out the end date of that activity, and as that activity is moved across the screen using the status line, for example, one day at a time, you can see the date move, and it's always correct. So it's a very good way of picking out key information and demonstrating it on the plan. And the other thing people like to demonstrate on the plan is we can put a little picture, and we supply about 1 megabyte of clip art, which is useful in a project management sense. Sorry, I messed up with that. So picture annotation connected to the top right-hand corner. I need to browse to find a suitable picture, which is what I thought I was doing. So pick up a flag, for example, that's very popular, with no surround and no background color, and perhaps a bit too big. And so that sort of thing is quite important. So when we take that to output, then we can, and I'll go straight to preview because we don't have a printer on the screen, then we're taking what we call a border, a four-sided header and footer that you could design with the graphical tool that comes with Power Project, and you've got a standard sort of output template, so we can have different outputs, simpler ones or more complex ones. We start with that, ones with different panels and watermarks. And so the information you present to people, the quality of that can speak volumes. And Power Project is really second to none when it comes to the quality on any Windows printing device, any paper size, scale to a page, PDFs, copy to the clipboard, paste into Word, PowerPoint, Excel, that sort of thing. So the presentation qualities are second to none. And there are some aspects of that are useful to extend, and that is we can also have color code libraries to identify, and you can establish these libraries, call them what you want, have as much information as you want. They can also be hierarchical. So I want to identify the trade contractor is going to carry out the work. So I've made a list of standard trade contractors, and I'm going to say, well, the carpenter company is going to do the hoarding. So by drag and drop, I can say, well, demolition company's going to do the demolition, seems rather obvious. The ground worker's going to do the excavation. We could put all of this in a column and pick from a selector on a column. We don't have to do it by drag and drop. It just seems to be a bit easier in my view, a bit quicker, because I can do more than one at a time. I can select multiple tasks, control click, shift click, that sort of thing, and say, well, these are the concrete guys. And so you've got a colorful plan, which is meaningful to you, but when you do output that, you have the option of including this legend so you can show people, they can understand what they're looking at. And it is also a very powerful mechanism for filtering. So this whole window could have a filter based on that code. So I say, well, just show me the concrete tasks. And I only want to see on the concrete tasks, I don't want them to know about the criticality or the logic links. So I've just made it quite anodyne, and they will only see that information. So if I'm putting out a package program, I've got that easy way of doing it. I don't want to run that filter every time. So this view, this window, I can save it and give it another name, and focus people's attention on the bits that they should be looking at. So we can have more than one window open at the same time. They are the same. It's the same information. It's just in different areas. So if I take the reschedule off, if I move it somewhere, you can see it move everywhere. Rescheduling that moves it everywhere. So that is a really powerful and highly used mechanism for work-specific packages drawn from a more complex whole, where they're reassured that you've got that. And the other way of organizing it is to group things together into major steps of work, which are called a work breakdown structure technically, or a summary item. We can take a collection of tasks and we can drop them into a parent, which we could call substructure, for example. And then clicking on the minus sign collapses substructure, clicking on the plus sign or double clicking on the graphic expands it. We can pick the whole lot up and move it, of course, if you want to do that, which is not doing that because it's getting pushed back to the beginning because of the rescheduling. So, and if it's extended, then the parent is extended as well. If there are gaps in it, we can show you those gaps, all sorts of things like that. So it's good to have a top level program with 10, 20 major steps. People can understand that at a strategic level, and they're reassured that you've got the detail behind it. And you can do that with any task. You drill down inside demolition, plan that in more detail, etc., etc. And people have huge plans in Power Project, but they don't have to be huge. And I want to do a quick bit of planning to finish this off, and just to show you another feature that's also extremely useful. If you do things on a regular basis, I can say, well, our superstructure is similar to one we've done before, and if I put that, in fact, I'm just going to undo that. I'm just going to take the reschedule off whilst I do that. I'm just going to drop the superstructure element into my plan, one that I've done previously, and I've saved it in my template. So here's a standard series of steps that we've gone through, and all I've got to do then is link them up. They're already coded. They could have resources, and it's just a very, very quick way of doing a standard plan. And so any summary can be made into a task pool entry. So it's very easy to do. And it just means if you do things on a similar status every time, it's very, very easy to make a plan. So here's our sort of roofing. So we do have to finish the final roof slab before we can do the roof covering, and before we can do the last bit of curtain walling. And so we've got to do that bit sequentially. Get some sensible links in here. So I missed withdrawing that link. So if I then schedule that, we can see the impact. Okay, so we've made a decent project plan very quickly, and it also means that we can filter out all the things that fit into that group for that trade contractor and output it all very quickly. So they're all in a very presentational, strong sense. So they're all of the key components of making a project plan, and I would urge you to do that as an absolute minimum. Identify who's carrying out the work, have the work detailed to a reasonable level of detail, have it logically linked, have it grouped in major sections, so it's not overwhelming and it's got some structure. And Power Project gives you all those ways of doing it in a very elegant, intuitive way of behaving. So, but I just want to quickly finish this webinar off by just saying, well, there's quite a lot more to it. So once you've done that, then of course we might consider how many people we need to do each task and what that means for how many people we need on site, and have we got enough drying rooms and toilets. And so there is a whole issue about resources I'm going to touch on briefly, and to do it quickly, I'm going to use a window that I've created previously. So this is in the standard template. I've got our project plan as before here. And we've got a different spreadsheet on the left-hand side, and we've got a number of histograms graphs at the bottom of the screen. So we can have a histogram showing us information about a single resource or many resources. And we can do that as a graph, and we can do that as a spreadsheet. So if I said in my plan here that I needed 4 carpenters to do the work, then I've got 4 people on that task, and my histogram suddenly introduces 4 people. So I can easily do that. Demolition, I need a guy to help out there. Excavation, we definitely need a couple of guys there. And when it comes to foundations, we need 4 more guys. Ground floor slab, 4 more guys. And that'll do. And at that point, we've just exceeded a level that we put in. This blue line is the maximum number of carpenters we've got available to us, and that's set in the library. So we can use it for resource leveling, and that means we can squash that overusage down, and we can see the result of that. What will happen if we don't have enough resources to make our plan? So we haven't got enough resources, and we say if we leveled that, what would that mean? Well, in this case, you would you'd extend one and delay another. It's got an impact on the end date. Nobody's going to do that just for the lack of 2 guys. So so you'd probably go and shout at the supplier to provide more details. But if you've already know the information about how many resources you really need, so if we say, well, you're going to need 10 at peak, then we're not going to exceed our blue line. So you've got those ways of doing it. We need 2 bricklayers for our manholes, and so you can have multiple graphs. You can have stacked graphs to see how many people in total, and we can have resource histogram, a spreadsheet showing us how many people or man hours, days of that person, that type of person on that task in that week, and we can say, well, we only need 12 hours at that time. So it's a huge amount of editing capabilities, display capabilities, and output capabilities. So anything you see on screen is what you're going to get when you print it out. And if you don't want the whole thing, you can also just have the histograms. It's not the best histogram that chooses it. To have the histograms in their own window, and so you could print those individually, or you could right mouse click on that, any histogram, and you could export the values to Excel. So the resourcing is fully covered if and when you want to get there. Not everybody makes a resource plan, but also what you can also do is you can have money, and you can graph that against time, and that leads to cash flow information. So that's something that's very popular. You could resource the cost of resources. So I could say a carpenter, we're paying a carpenter £25 an hour, we're charging him out at £50 an hour or whatever. Or I could just say, well, the subcontractor has told me he's going to do the hoarding for £12,000. So I could put a sum of money in, and then I've got some graphs at the bottom displaying that against time. So so if the client says, well, how much spend are you going to have of your 6.2 million in the first quarter of next year, here's a way of telling him without just resorting to Excel and having a very big spreadsheet with lots of columns for every week and doing some fancy things. This is going to carry these activities, the cost with the activities. And you can have a little resource, a little bar on the bar chart for the costs, and our default is that we spread the money across the activity. The money doesn't have to be connected to the activity. It could be a delayed start or extend it, but we can also not spread it evenly, and we can have a little graph that you can make to say, I'm going to backload this. So it's not going to change the total, it's just going to change how it's spread over time. And so when it's backloaded, I've got nearly 64,000 in August, 83,000 in September. If I undo that allocation, then you can see those numbers change. So it can affect the cash flow, not the total, but where it lands in time. And that can be an important event. Anything you see on screen, you're going to print it out. So not everybody uses COS, as I've said. Probably I would say 25%, 30% of our users, certainly a majority, 75% or so, will use resources. Everybody's going to make a plan, as I said at the beginning. That's an essential step. And but what everybody's also going to do is, if you win this job, and that's the whole purpose, if you are awarded this project, then you're going to monitor it as it progresses. And that is an absolutely key aspect of a tool like this. So it's not just a static plan that you put in the drawer, it's something that is updated and lives and breathes, and you record what's actually happened, slightly protectively, but also to predict what's going to happen. So that is the other major use, and this is what I would say everybody also does. So I'm going to open another view here called Progress, and Power Project is particularly strong in progressing. Okay, so all I've got is a different spreadsheet, and I haven't done anything else at this moment in time, but there are two things that we need to do. First, one of them is called making a baseline, and a baseline is a snapshot at this moment in time that allows us to save everything about this project in such a way that we don't forget it, and we can interleave it in the plan and make comparisons against it. So we're not going to forget what we originally were going to do. And so on screen now, I've got the baseline, which is the yellow activities, and the regular activities, if you like, are already there, and I can move that, and that doesn't affect the baseline. The baseline, it doesn't forget anything. It doesn't forget the resources we've put in. There are costs, so there can be variances there. So here you can see that the demolition is now going to be 5 days later, because that column is about the end variance, than we originally said. So you need to have a baseline. You can make multiple baselines at any stage. People make them weekly sometimes. But the other thing we need to do is to take this big black line down the screen, and that's time now, if you like, and move that to, say, the end of August. So we've been working on this job 4 weeks, and that big black line, where it goes through an activity, or indeed its baseline, that is where how much work we should have done. So for the demolition, we should have done 56.25% of the work. We should have finished the hoarding completely, and it's probably good if I format those cells to be a percentage and right justified. So we can easily say, well, for the hoarding, that went really well, and we finished that early. We finished that, was supposed to be the 17th, but we actually managed to finish it on the 16th. So we've got a historical record of exactly when that happened. And again, maybe I should have paid more attention to my cell formatting, just so it's clearer and takes less room. But we couldn't get the demolition guys to start. They were already scheduled for the Monday. They were too busy, and it's gone reasonably well, but we only estimate that they've done half of the amount of work. So 50% of the work has been done. So we've taken half of the task, chopped it in two, left a little bit that's remaining, and we could still edit the remaining duration of that and say, well, it's still going to take 10 days to finish that activity, and that's because of the resource on it is taking longer. So we've got this line that bends backwards, and if we reschedule that now, Power Project can take the uncompleted portions of tasks or the whole task ahead of time now and push all of that on. So if we don't do anything about it, we're going to be a day late. So this way of reporting progress is all right. So there's questions coming in about base. I'll come back to the questions later. I just want to finish off this and let everybody go if they want to. But I did also want to show you that I can enter the progress directly in Power Project, but I can also take it out of Power Project and send it to a mobile device, Android or iOS or Windows, and I can download it to this device, nominate in a person to update it. I can navigate the hierarchy. I can identify the activities, and I can say how much has been done, either by percentage or by date, and how many days are remaining. So you can take photographs and you can attach notes. So there's a lot of functionality. All of that can then find its way back to Power Project. So this additional, very cheap add-on can extend the reach of Power Project to the people doing the work, or you're an aid for you as you're mobile and recording things, and it can produce an as-built record, a historical record of what you've done, a prediction of what's going to continue. So I can also say that that is the sort of sum total of what I want to present in this webinar, because you're going to have that standard process that you're going through. So you're going to create a plan. You're going to chop bits up to give them to the different individuals, organizations or individuals involved in that. You're going to maybe resource it, cost load it, definitely progress it, and Power Project is the tool that you can have to do that. But I can also say that Power Project is second to none when it comes to some other aspects. So we do have a module, just so that you know, where we can take a 3D model of a building such as this, and we can link that to the activities in the program, and we can play that as a movie against time. So you've got a virtual 4D BIM aspect in the project itself. So I'll just let that play out a little bit, and I'll send you the recording of that, and I will address some of the questions that are coming in. So Eric is asking, can the baseline be managed from unit complete versus percent complete? And I should say unit complete instead of percent complete. So yes, you can progress a task by a percentage, or you can also have what we call task work and say, well, this task has got 117 light fittings, and I'm going to progress it by how many light fittings we've done. So you'd say, I've done 42 light fittings this week or this period. And so you can progress it by unit, not just by percentage. You can progress it just by remaining duration, if that's what you want to do. James is also asking, can Power Project work with Microsoft project files? And the answer to that is yes, we can export to a Microsoft file format called XML that I could email to somebody. Even if I don't have Microsoft Project, I can do that, and they can open it, and vice versa. But if I have got Microsoft Project on my computer as well, I can save and open a Microsoft Project MPP file that's its native file format. So you might lose information in saving from Power Project to Microsoft Project, because there are quite a lot of things that Power Project can do that Microsoft can't, but you would get all of the resources, tasks, logic links where appropriate, all of those various aspects. So so that's the situation that we find.